North Korea is facing a demographic crisis that could define its future. With fertility rates plummeting to just 8 children per woman, the nation is on track for a shrinking population, an alarming prospect for a country already grappling with poverty and isolation. Despite maintaining one of the largest militaries in the world, how will North Korea sustain its workforce and national defense as its population declines? Can a nation as secretive and rigid as North Korea adapt to survive this looming demographic collapse? Let's uncover the numbers and the potential consequences behind this silent crisis. The demographic landscape of North Korea shows a dramatic transformation from its historical patterns. Specifically, the nation that once recorded a fertility rate of 1 children per woman in 1900 has experienced a steady decline throughout the decades. The United Nations Population Fund's latest assessment reveals a concerning trend in North Korea's birth rates. Currently, the average North Korean woman has 8 children in her lifetime. This represents a significant drop from previous decades, particularly considering that the fertility rate stood at 2.36 in 1990. Furthermore, a notable urban-rural divide exists in fertility patterns, with urban areas showing a rate of 1.89 children per woman compared to 2.19 in rural regions. Although concerning, North Korea's demographic situation presents a unique case among developing nations. North Korea's fertility rate of 1.8 children per woman in 2023 stands out in a region plagued by some of the lowest birth rates in the world. In stark contrast, South Korea, one of the most advanced economies in the region, has a fertility rate of just 0.78, the lowest globally. Similarly, Japan, known for its aging population, has a slightly higher rate of 1.26, while China, with its vast population and former one-child policy legacy, reports a fertility rate of 1.4. This comparison highlights a paradox. While North Korea's birth rate is higher than that of its wealthier neighbors, it still falls below the replacement level of 2.1 children per woman, which is necessary to maintain a stable population. This puts the isolated regime on the same trajectory of population decline, raising critical questions about its future amid economic hardship, military prioritization, and an aging population. North Korea is approaching several critical demographic milestones that will shape its future. Experts predict that the country's working-age population, defined as those aged 15 to 64, will begin to decline by 2030. This will be followed by an overall population decrease starting in 2034. Currently, home to approximately 26 million people, North Korea's total population is expected to reach a peak of 34 million by 2045 before entering a phase of gradual decline. This demographic shift stems from various factors. Notably, the country experienced significant changes in its population policies over the decades. During the 1970s, authorities made contraception readily available due to concerns about economic burden when the fertility rate approached 4 children per woman. Subsequently, as the rate dropped to around 2 in the early 1990s, the government attempted to encourage higher birth rates. Nevertheless, these efforts were thwarted by the severe food crisis following the Soviet Union's collapse, which permanently altered the country's demographic trajectory. Initially, North Korea's population policies underwent dramatic shifts in response to changing economic and social conditions. The nation's demographic journey reveals 3 distinct phases that shaped its current population crisis. Following the Korean War 1950-1953, North Korea experienced significant population growth. The total fertility rate reached 5.11, as the state actively encouraged large families to support post-war reconstruction. Between 1960 and 1970, the population surged from 11.7 million to 15 million citizens. Moreover, the country's standard of living surpassed South Korea's until the mid-1970s, creating favorable conditions for population growth. In response to mounting economic challenges in the late 1970s, North Korean authorities introduced a series of stringent population control measures. They ensured widespread access to contraception and abortion services, encouraged citizens to delay marriage, and actively promoted the benefits of smaller family sizes through state propaganda. The government even adopted a striking slogan: 1 is good, 2 are many, 3 mean having no conscience, 4 are stupid. Accordingly, these measures aim to better utilize the female workforce and manage economic resources. The mid-1990s famine, commonly referred to as the Arduous March, left a profound and lasting impact on North Korea's demographic and economic landscape. The death toll from the crisis is estimated to range between 240,000 and 5 million people, marking one of the darkest periods in the nation's history. During this time, North Korea lost approximately 1.5 million tons of food reserves, plunging the population into severe hunger and malnutrition. Compounding the crisis, the country experienced an 85% reduction in power generation capacity, further crippling its ability to sustain basic infrastructure and services. The famine's effects extended beyond immediate mortality. Eventually, the collapse of the public distribution system forced women to work in informal markets, leading to delayed marriages and reduced childbearing. Child malnutrition rates increased from 3% in 1987 to 14% in 1997. In 1998, the government attempted to reverse the demographic decline by hosting the National Meeting of Mothers to encourage childbirth. However, these efforts proved ineffective as the population continued to decrease. The combined impact of earlier population control measures and the devastating famine created long-lasting effects that continue to influence North Korea's current demographic challenges. At present, North Korea's declining population poses unprecedented challenges for its labor-dependent economy. The nation's reliance on manual workforce across industries makes it uniquely vulnerable to demographic shifts, creating a complex web of economic challenges. With limited technological advancement, North Korea's economic model remains heavily dependent on human labor. Important to realize that the country operates with minimal fuel, machinery, and advanced technology. The situation is made even more challenging by several persistent issues. North Korea struggles with a lack of technological advancement, leaving the country unable to replace human workers with machines effectively. Its industrial processes remain largely unautomated, limiting efficiency and productivity. Additionally, the agricultural sector relies heavily on manual labor, further emphasizing the nation's dependence on a shrinking workforce. North Korea's military sector, the cornerstone of its economy, is under immense strain due to the country's declining population. With an active military force of 1.3 million soldiers, representing 5% of the total population, the burden on resources and manpower is considerable. This pressure is further intensified by the country's defense spending, which accounted for a staggering 33% of its GDP in 2022. The nation maintains the densest concentration of firepower near the demilitarized zone with South Korea. Similarly, the military sector currently employs the country's youngest and strongest workers, who could otherwise contribute to economic development. As opposed to its neighbors, North Korea faces unique challenges in addressing its demographic crisis. The contrast becomes evident when examining economic adaptability. Japan and South Korea have already begun adapting to demographic challenges through automation and technological advancement. The North Korean economy, conversely, cannot replace its working population with automation. This technological gap creates a critical situation where the country is growing old before getting rich. The economic implications extend beyond industrial production. The government's refusal to dismantle its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief has resulted in continued isolation from global supply chains. This isolation further cements the nation's dependence on labor-intensive methods, as access to modern machinery and crucial materials remains limited. The state-controlled economy, which determines production quantities and pricing, faces mounting pressure from these demographic shifts. The combination of declining workforce availability and limited technological advancement threatens to undermine the nation's economic stability, particularly in sectors requiring substantial manual labor. Facing a looming demographic crisis, the North Korean government has implemented stringent measures to boost its declining population. The regime's response combines strict medical regulations with extensive propaganda campaigns, creating a comprehensive strategy to increase birth rates. The North Korean state has intensified ideological campaigns aimed at reshaping women's roles in society, with a particular focus on promoting childbearing. Under the leadership of Kim Yo-jong, the regime's propaganda department has amplified efforts to encourage larger families. These initiatives include factory tours featuring model women who deliver speeches to inspire others, strict media control, ensuring that all content reinforces family values, and mandatory educational programs emphasizing the importance of marriage and childbirth. Additionally, The government has introduced economic incentives, such as providing extra food rations to families with 4 or more children. The government has established a system of recognition for women with multiple children. Notably, mothers are officially celebrated as the most sacrificial model citizens. Additionally, the state introduced Mother's Day in 2012, creating a platform to honor women with large families. The regime's approach, simultaneously combining restrictions and incentives, has met with mixed responses. Young women, particularly in urban areas, remain reluctant to marry and have children. This resistance stems largely from harsh living conditions, where women must balance economic responsibilities with childcare. The government's focus on ideological solutions, rather than addressing practical challenges, like the lack of basic amenities, has limited the effectiveness of these measures. In late 2023, Kim Jong-un publicly acknowledged the demographic challenge at the National Conference of Mothers, expressing concern over the decade-long decline in birth rates. Notwithstanding these efforts, many women argue that practical support, such as washing machines and reliable hot water supply, would be more effective than ideological campaigns. The military might of North Korea stands at a critical crossroads as demographic shifts threaten its traditional force structure. The nation's armed forces, undoubtedly among the world's largest relative to population size, face unprecedented challenges in maintaining their strength amid declining birth rates. North Korea sustains a massive military presence, with 3 million active duty personnel, accounting for roughly 5% of the total population. In addition to this, the country has an extensive reserve force of 6 million, bringing the total number of individuals tied to military service to nearly 30% of the population. This immense force structure is supported by an extraordinary financial commitment, with up to 33% of the nation's GDP allocated annually to defense spending. Markedly, the Korean People's Army operates through a comprehensive draft system that requires men to serve between 8 to 10 years and women to serve for 5 years. At this instant, the military maintains its own extensive network of farms, trading companies, and resource operations to sustain its massive force structure. Similar to other sectors, North Korea's military is grappling with the effects of the nation's demographic decline. The shrinking pool of eligible recruits, driven by declining birth rates, is making it increasingly difficult to maintain personnel numbers. Additionally, there is growing competition with the civilian workforce for young workers, further exacerbating the challenge. Furthermore, extended service requirements also affect women's childbearing years. The military currently compensates for qualitative disadvantages against South Korea's forces through numerical superiority, with North Korea's 3 million active soldiers far exceeding South Korea's 500,000. Yet, this strategy becomes increasingly unsustainable as the population contracts. In response to conventional force challenges, North Korea has intensified its focus on nuclear capabilities. The regime allocates between 25% to 30% of its GDP to defense spending, including substantial investments in nuclear weapons development. This strategic pivot reflects a broader shift toward asymmetric capabilities to offset demographic weaknesses. The nuclear program has achieved significant milestones, with estimates suggesting North Korea could possess material for 40 to 50 nuclear weapons. Straight away, this development indicates a strategic adaptation to maintain military deterrence despite population constraints. The regime has successfully tested missiles capable of striking the United States with nuclear warheads, demonstrating its commitment to maintaining military relevance despite demographic challenges. The military implications of North Korea's population decline extend beyond conventional forces. The nation has developed approximately 6,800 hackers capable of targeting enemy computer networks, signaling a shift toward technology-based warfare that requires fewer but more specialized personnel. This transformation reflects the regime's adaptation to demographic realities while maintaining its military-first policy. East Asia's demographic landscape reveals striking parallels among nations facing population decline. A comparative analysis shows how North Korea's challenges mirror broader regional trends. South Korea is facing an unparalleled population crisis, with its fertility rate dropping to just 72 births per woman in 2023, the lowest ever recorded for a country at peace. The consequences of this dramatic decline are far-reaching. The population is expected to decrease by 12%, and by 2050, there will be more citizens over the age of 80 than those under 20. Additionally, the pool of potential military recruits will shrink drastically, with projections indicating it will be less than 10% of the United States recruitment pool by the same year. China is now confronting a demographic crisis of its own, with its population shrinking by 2.8 million people in 2023, signaling the onset of a range of significant challenges. The country's fertility rate has fallen to below 1.2 children per woman, well below the replacement level, further exacerbating the population decline. At the same time, China's working-age population has decreased by 10 million, putting immense pressure on its labor force and economy. By 2050, the population is expected to dip to 1.3 billion, a substantial decline that will reshape the country's demographic makeup. What sets China apart from other nations facing similar demographic issues is the fact that it is aging before reaching the levels of wealth seen in more developed countries. With a nominal per capita GDP of just $80,600, China's economic development is still far behind wealthier nations like Japan, where the nominal per capita GDP stands at $38,000. This disparity places China in a unique and challenging position, as it faces the dual pressures of an aging population and slower economic growth than its advanced counterparts. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict has exacerbated demographic challenges throughout Eastern Europe, with Russia facing particularly severe long-term consequences. In 2023, the country recorded its lowest birth rates ever, further straining its population growth. At the same time, there has been a significant outflow of young professionals seeking better opportunities abroad, contributing to a brain drain. Additionally, labor migration from Central Asia, which had been a crucial source of workforce support, has also declined, leaving Russia with fewer workers to sustain its economy and demographic balance. Evidently, the war has undermined all potential sources of population growth in Russia. The exodus of hundreds of thousands of young men and women has reduced the already small cohort in prime reproductive years. The demographic crisis in these nations presents distinct characteristics. South Korea, despite investing over $200 billion in child-rearing initiatives over 16 years, continues to struggle with declining birth rates. In contrast, China's workforce challenges stem from its previous one-child policy, with each rising generation becoming barely half as large as the one before it. These regional trends provide crucial context for understanding North Korea's demographic trajectory. Unlike its neighbors, North Korea maintains minimal immigration, with China averaging a net loss of 265,000 migrants annually since 1960. The fastest remedy, relaxation of immigration policies, remains unlikely across the region, given that Japan and South Korea maintain foreign population shares of merely 2% and 4% respectively. Profound social changes sweep across North Korean society as traditional family structures undergo unprecedented transformation. Marriage patterns, demographic distributions, and youth perspectives reflect deeper societal shifts affecting the nation's population dynamics. Traditional marriage customs in North Korean society face significant alterations as economic pressures reshape social norms. A 2014 survey of North Korean defectors born between 1989 and 1994 revealed that more than one-third of respondents considered economic conditions crucial for marriage or opted to remain unmarried. The changing patterns of marriage are becoming increasingly evident in various aspects of society. The average age of women entering their first marriage has risen to 25, while for men, it is 28. At the same time, the number of marriages officially registered in urban areas is steadily declining, while informal cohabitation is on the rise as an alternative to traditional marriage. Notably, women from well-to-do families increasingly postpone marriage, prioritizing career development and economic stability. This shift represents a departure from traditional norms where women over 25 were labeled as old maids. North Korea's population is unevenly distributed between urban and rural regions, with census data revealing that 59.6% of the total population lives in urban areas. The capital city, Pyongyang, alone accounts for 11.5% of the nation's population. Fertility rates also vary significantly between these areas. Rural regions maintain higher fertility rates, with an average of 2.19 children per woman, while urban areas report a lower fertility rate of 1.89 children per woman. These differences highlight the contrasting demographic dynamics in the country's urban and rural populations. Young North Koreans, exhibits significantly different attitudes toward marriage and family formation compared to previous generations. A survey of recent defectors indicates that economic considerations now outweigh traditional factors in spouse selection. Generally, young people's priorities have shifted toward modern spouse selection criteria emphasize economic capability over political standing. Women increasingly prefer partners who can travel abroad or earn foreign currency, such as diplomats and trade workers. Certainly, this represents a departure from earlier preferences for military officers and party officials. The dissolution of the concept of a great socialist family has altered young people's relationship with the state. Soon after the economic hardships of the 1990s, women began assuming stronger roles in households, while men's traditional authority diminished. Altogether, these changes reflect broader societal transformations, as younger generations prioritize individual economic success over traditional collective values. The transformation extends beyond marriage patterns to family dynamics. Women now frequently serve as primary breadwinners, managing household finances through market activities. This economic role has strengthened their position in marriage decisions, with some choosing younger partners to maintain greater control in relationships. These social changes occur against the backdrop of state efforts to maintain traditional family structures. The government's creation of Mother's Day in 2012 and the designation of mothers with multiple children as heroines represent attempts to preserve conventional family values. Nonetheless, young North Koreans continue to adapt their social and familial relationships to economic realities, often diverging from state-endorsed traditional norms. Projections for North Korea's demographic future reveal complex scenarios that could reshape the nation's political, economic, and military landscape. Demographic experts have outlined several potential trajectories based on current trends and policy responses. In the most optimistic projection for North Korea's future demographic trajectory, the country could see a gradual stabilization of its population dynamics. According to assessments by the United Nations, North Korea might be able to sustain its current population level through 2030, with a projected total of 26,174 citizens. However, this best-case scenario hinges on several critical factors. The country's fertility rate would need to stabilize at 1.71 children per woman by 2035, a significant improvement from current trends. Additionally, the urbanization rate would need to rise to 68.1% by the same year, reflecting a shift toward more urban living and its associated economic benefits. Furthermore, North Korea would need to maintain its population density at around 222 people per square kilometer, ensuring that its population distribution does not become too strained in urban centers. For this scenario to unfold, successful government policies promoting higher birth rates would need to be implemented, alongside significant economic reforms that foster conditions conducive to family formation and long-term demographic stability. The worst-case projections for North Korea's future demographic situation paint a much more challenging and uncertain picture. According to the United Nations, despite efforts to stabilize the population, the country's population could decline to approximately 25,787,127 by 2050. This decline would be driven by a combination of factors, including a shrinking working-age population, which might decrease by as much as 10% by 2040. In addition to this, the median age of the population is projected to rise significantly, reaching 42.9 years by 2050, signaling an aging population with fewer young people to support the elderly. As the proportion of elderly citizens increases, the state faces growing difficulties in providing for this aging demographic, placing immense pressure on social services and healthcare systems. The economic consequences could also be severe, particularly in labor-intensive industries that rely on a young and active workforce. Workforce shortages would likely result in reduced productivity and economic output, further compounding the challenges faced by an already struggling economy. These trends highlight the deepening difficulties North Korea would encounter if its demographic decline continues unabated. Over the long term, demographic decline in North Korea could lead to a range of serious institutional challenges, with far-reaching consequences for the nation's economic, military, and political stability. Research into similar cases suggests that the country could face three primary collapse scenarios. The first of these is economic destabilization, driven by the inevitable aging of the population and the resulting shrinking of the workforce. As fewer people enter the labor market, North Korea's ability to sustain its military-industrial complex could be severely compromised. This scenario mirrors the impact of demographic decline on Russia's military capabilities, particularly in light of the challenges the country has faced during the Ukraine conflict, where a declining population and workforce have placed increasing strain on its resources. Another significant scenario is military restructuring. If the population continues to decline, the Korean People's Army, currently consisting of 3 million active personnel, may struggle to maintain its strength. To adapt, the regime could shift its defense strategy by relying more heavily on nuclear deterrence to compensate for a reduced conventional military force. Additionally, North Korea may focus more on cyber warfare capabilities, investing in these technologies as an alternative to traditional military expansion, while scaling down its conventional forces. Finally, political instability could emerge as a result of the combined pressures from demographic decline and economic challenges. The strain on the population could create conditions conducive to internal instability, particularly during periods of leadership transition. Historical precedents suggest that regimes experiencing demographic stress are more vulnerable to shifts in power, as the population grows increasingly dissatisfied with the government's handling of both economic and social issues. The United States, along with other regional powers, has prepared detailed contingency plans to address the various scenarios that could arise from North Korea's potential collapse. These plans are designed to manage the fallout from a sudden breakdown in the country's stability, focusing on 3 critical priorities. The priority is securing North Korea's nuclear materials and weapons. Given the highly volatile nature of the region and North Korea's substantial nuclear arsenal, preventing the spread of these weapons or their falling into the wrong hands is of paramount importance. The international community is particularly concerned with ensuring that these weapons are safeguarded to avoid the risk of them being used or transferred to non-state actors. The second key mission involves restoring order and dealing with any potential military resistance. Should North Korea's central government collapse, there would likely be an urgent need to stabilize the country to prevent widespread chaos. This includes neutralizing any remaining military forces that may resist external intervention or attempt to maintain control. Regional powers, particularly South Korea and the United States, would likely be called upon to deploy forces to manage the situation and ensure that order is restored swiftly. Finally, the plans emphasize providing essential services to the population. In the aftermath of a collapse, millions of North Koreans could find themselves in dire need of food, healthcare, and other basic services. The priority would be to assist in meeting these critical needs, ensuring that the civilian population is not left to suffer in the aftermath of a power vacuum. Humanitarian aid, coupled with efforts to rebuild key infrastructure, would be essential for stabilizing the country and preventing further destabilization across the region. The demographic crisis intersects with North Korea's nuclear ambitions, as maintaining both conventional forces and nuclear capabilities becomes increasingly challenging. The regime's response to these demographic pressures could determine regional stability in the coming decades. North Korea faces a demographic crisis that could define its future. With the working-age population shrinking by 2030 and overall numbers declining from 2034, the regime struggles to sustain its massive military and labor-driven economy. Propaganda and strict policies have failed to boost birth rates as young people prioritize economic stability and women delay childbirth. Can North Korea adapt? Or is it heading for collapse? What's your take on this looming crisis? Share your thoughts below. If this video gives you useful information, please like the video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next videos.